And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome. Welcome to the infinite way where spirituality meets humanity. And it brings me such great pleasure to introduce our guests. I'm Dr. Enolia, your host, and our guest today is Preeti Vasudevan. And Preeti, I would like to introduce to you, is an award winning cultural storyteller and thought leader, exploring individual identity and the critical role of arts in the expression of the individual story in a global society. A criticality acclaimed choreographer. Preeti's provocative and unconventional storytelling challenges the status quo of dance theater, bridging ancient traditions with contemporary world. And so there is a plethora of things that Preeti brings to the table, having participated in prominent organizations like TED Talk, the Centre National for de la Danse, Paris, Lincoln Centers, New York, Guggenheim Works and Process, New York, and Joyce Foundation, just to name a few. But the arts and advocacy through cultural diplomacy is key to Preeti's work. So I want to introduce you to Preeti Vasudevan. Welcome, Preeti.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Enolia, and thank you so much for the introduction. It's just like it makes me blush a bit.
Well deserved, well deserved. When you work hard in your career, it deserves to be noted. So it's my honor and my pleasure. And to have you here is just such a special treat
Thank
because when I met you and when I saw your work, I was in awe. Okay. I truly was, in the respect that I met you because you were amplifying women's voices.
you.
And that I love because that empowerment is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
And so I immediately wanted to say, okay, who is this woman? How is she amplifying women's voices?
Yeah.
And then when I learned about your storytelling and dance methodology, it just pulled at my heartstrings because I love dance. I love storytelling. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't work without storytelling and dance. Those are the two key components that really just link everything. So, talk to us about starting out in your love of dance and how this beautiful world brought you to want to move your body.
Well, I mean, I think I was born and brought up in India. So if you ask my mother that question, she'll say that, oh, Preeti was dancing before she walked. I think for me, there always has been like an inner dance for me. Like no matter what I do and where I go, I always feel like there are a million cells in me, like always dancing all the time. And I suppose that was there from childhood. So, and India is a country of I always say it's like a concentrated bubble of everything in life. So I just think the sounds and the rhythms and the all the different tonalities and everything, I must have been absorbing when I was young and just sort of immersed in it. So for me, it's like, it was never like walk in a straight line. It was like, what if I do this and I go there? And so I started very young. My mother felt that I had a lot of energy. Like in America, when I say the Energizer Bunny, most people nod their heads. I was like an Uber Energizer Bunny. I had like so much energy all over me. Um, and also my connection with just the natural world was very, very deep. I grew up in the big cities in India, but for me, it was always like this amazing thing of finding nature within the city. And I always found that very normal. I didn't have to run away somewhere else to find nature. I always found it right there. So my love for animals and insects and all that was from a young age. So for me, I think the movement really came from observing nature, like observing animals. I remember I was supposed to study for a history exam, and I saw a spider in front of me, and I spent the next hour moving with the spider.
Oh, wow. Okay,
And
no,
and I thought
really,
like,
that's
okay, so if I'm gonna move like this, are you gonna move like that? Oh, you did. Oh, if I do this way, what are you gonna do? And I got completely mesmerized by the way we sort of found each other through just movement. And I'm not saying we saw each other because I think movement is beyond that. So I've always been interested in that. So I think connecting with nature and taking the movement into my own body through nature and then reciprocating was always part of me. So I think with all that energy that was I was absorbing and giving, my mother, when I was age 5, put me into dance classes. She said, right, she's got to go and get a bit cultural, and I'm going to put her in classical dance. And I'm from the south of India, so
mhm,
I was sent to study Bharatanatyam, which is the classical dance of South India. It
yes.
it traces its history a few thousand years, starting as a ritualistic practice in the Hindu temples, and then through colonial period, it came out from the temple to the theater, making it more secular. It's having its own new evolution now, where it is, what it is now, as it's become more diasporic and more global now. So it's evolving as we speak, but that's the form that I trained in, which was wonderful because it was the rituals were still there, the poetry was still there. So I had to train in classical singing, South Indian singing. So that was part of my dance training. So we all had to train in singing so we knew what we were doing. And my teachers were really great because they would break down the languages for us. So we weren't just doing something by imitation. We really
Mhm,
understood the words, the breakdown of words, whether it was Sanskrit or Hindi or Tamil or Telugu or any of those languages that we have in India, and the poetry that came alongside that, some very old and some more contemporary. So we were immersed in multiple languages, the meaning behind them, the context, and the movement connected with it, the music and movement. So my world sort of revolved around that a lot artistically, and it gave me pure joy. I was just very happy.
so so before moving beyond the classical dance, the thought that I have, because I've had the great privilege of seeing classical Indian dance,
Hmm.
and there's something transcendent, and that's the word I'm going to use.
Hmm.
There's something, and while you were learning, were you learning not just movements, but the and it belittles it just to say the meaning behind the movements, but I want to bring it to that dimension of consciousness, that because that's where the dance takes you. I
Yeah,
mean, it was done for the temples,
yeah,
so for being created for the temples,
yeah.
there is a, like we know that certain power of words takes you to a transcendence of the words. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you were learning when you were learning the classical dance that took you the transcendence beyond just dancing out a group of movements and singing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think now I can talk about it, that I have a few more years added on to me. But at that time, like every form, in order to get to the transcendental moment or the level of consciousness, you've got to first train the body. You've got to like
Mm,
discipline the body. Even yoga is that. You've got, in order to reach that mind space and that stillness, you've got to discipline the body. And therefore, you have the asanas, you have the techniques that you really, really discipline different parts of the organs, the skeletal system, the muscles, breathing, patterning, knowing how to channel your breathing, everything, so that you create that space within you, right? So you're not
mhm,
always like fragmented. I would say our dance, the what I learned was approached that way. I never learned the classical form the old way, like how they taught in the temples. When the form I learned had already come out and was actually being sort of saved in many ways by one of the pioneers of my classical form during the colonial period. So she brought that out, and a lot of the old teachers were, really very poor, and they didn't have a source of income, or they were sidelined because patronage from the royalty stopped. And then there was a lot of, discrimination about it leading to baser forms of prostitution just to make money. long story short, there was an abolition act. And then to counter it, a lot of Indians came to save the dance form and the teachers. And one of the institutions called Kalakshetra in southern India became this big house of how do we not just preserve but move it forward. So part of the methodology was to really streamline the technique. And they used the streamlining through some of the old texts. So there was a lot of research done on the dramaturgical texts, on the technique texts, and what means what. And one was written in second century BC, the other's written in 10th century AD, and so they became like the textbooks. And then so we have a whole array of like techniques, like how when I would compare to ballet, for instance, you have to learn the basic stances, you have to learn how to do your plies, you have to build muscular strength, you have to build stamina. So for us, it was first building physical stamina. But the biggest difference is that while we do that, we're also learning the old stories.
Right.
So it's fun at the same time. So the more you pick up the stamina, the more you want to dive deeper into the stories, right? So it starts off with your teacher teaching you how to do your facial expressions, because ours is like dance theater, it's a storytelling form. So we have to know how to emote through the face, through our hand symbols, our body shape. We take characters. And our form is divided into three areas. One is called pure technique, which does not contain meaning beyond joy. And the next one is really like interpreting poetry. So I
Hmm.
can become multiple characters as one dancer. And the third one is like drama, like a play. Each we have a big cast on stage, and each one is a character, and each one takes the shape of the character, the sort of walk of the character, the gait of the character.
Right.
So those are three forms that encompass and make my dance form. And because of that, as you can see, it's really sort of like structured in a there's a method behind that crazy madness to reach to reach that spiritual craziness. There's a method behind it. So for years we train in that, and as we learn the basic repertoire, then we build it to a little more complexity, then build it a little more complexity, until the teacher finds things that, oh, now you're ready to take on something more complex and more psychological.
Okay.
So and we have to trust the teacher. So that's the other thing. um when I was learning, we just have to trust the teacher. The teacher feels I'm not ready, I'm not ready, even if you feel you're ready. So there is something about humility in that. And there is something about listening. We had
Okay.
just talked about the whole idea of listening before. And sometimes when you're young, you're really eager to do everything. But if you can't, what you have to do is just watch and listen.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you can't always be the lead role in a play, even if you're fantastic. I remember playing the lead role in one of the biggest ballets in the company, and then the next iteration of the tour, I was pulled out and I was part of the core, and somebody else was put there, and I thought, what, did I do something wrong? And they said, no, you have to know everything. You have to know how all of this plays in the large picture, right? So, for us to get into that space of transcendence, I think that discipline needs to come in,
Mm.
and repetition. So the more you repeat, the more you get to understand, and then you can free yourself so that you can enter the zone. And I think that's when you sort of touch on that. And then we sort of categorize the dance form into four different kinds of expressions. One is the physical, the next
Right.
one is the vocal, like the sound, the music, and everything. The third is the accoutrements, like your costuming and your mise en scène. And the fourth one is what we're talking about now, called sattvika, which is the spiritual,
Okay.
which is the soul of the dance. That is the ritual. And that is when you feel space, time, and body merge as one. And
Beautiful.
that is incredible.
And how did storytelling and being an orator, because you have to have a passion for the spoken word, a true storyteller has a rhythm. It's like it's like a song.
Mhm.
And the art form is so powerful because you take us
Hmm.
from sitting in our chair, being present to a whole nother world just based on your words and the power of your words.
Hmm.
So, how and when did this enter into your life?
Well, it's I don't think there was one particular moment. I think it was just like an evolution, a series of moments. Um it's like a rite of passage at different times of your life. So when I was the in my teenage years, um I just went through, I remember a moment of realizing that I watched my teacher's body performing, and the way he held space and time, just it was just so powerful. I just could not, it was something I'd never seen or experienced before. Maybe I wasn't ready earlier, and that moment I was ready. And I just noticed that, and I noticed how he wasn't even present there, but he had actually transcended that moment. And with the and there was a merge between him and the singer in the orchestra, and the way the two had tuned in into this other world just held us all in this moment. And I think that really taught me a lot to sort of like go back to the studio, and when I would do my dance, where I could find that, because that is not something that can be taught,
No.
and that is something you had to discover for yourself. And part of that is letting go. Part of that is actually surrendering to the greater form that's art. I then had to realize that I'm only part of that river. I'm one of the fish that's swimming, and I have a role. My fish has a role. I had to go from there to there. you know. So I always keep that at the back of my mind that uh, if you're given the gift of art, it comes with a huge responsibility. You have to pass it on. You can't hold it for yourself, because then you'll kill the art. And art is the closest to the soul. It is our soul. But to access the soul, you can't hold on to it. It's like holding an egg very hard and it just breaks,
Yeah.
and you just have to hold it just right. But also know that it's gonna hatch soon, so you gotta let it go. So
Yeah.
I think that happened to me in the teenage years, and then I was touring a lot with my classical dance, meeting other dancers, community members, non-Indian dancers. I would take classes in different dance styles. But one thing very significant happened that opened the next door is I had an opportunity to go and live in Japan.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Beautiful.
and I went there for a year, and my role was both teacher and student. So I was playing both roles, and that taught me a lot. And so, I was teaching Indian classical dance, and I was learning Japanese classical dance. And I had to pay attention to how my body took that and what it did to me overall. And that changed me significantly, even to this day.
And what did it do? To please do tell.
It's very, very simple. It taught me how to look at my spine again.
Mm,
And that's the core of everything we do. It's not just, oh, I move my spine to take a position or a pose. It just taught me everything about how I listen, and it taught me how to become three-dimensional again. Because a lot of times in the proscenium theater, we've now performing to something very frontal. Even if you turn, that's where the audience is, right? And even my dance form had come to the theater by the time I started learning and performing. But when you go to like the temples of India and you look at the sculptures, they're not all frontal, right?
no.
And they're very three-dimensional. And then I realized that some bulb went off in me, and I started looking at sculptures again, and I thought, oh my God, it's all about the spine. And then I started paying attention to which sculptor knew about the spine.
Wow.
So I realized that that sculptor might have spent time with the dancer or the dancing girl, because he understood the body, and that body came alive. And that's what we look at, because there's energy in that body, right? It's in movement. It's just frozen in movement. It's like the moment you take away that spell, it'll probably move.
Right.
Japan taught me that because I had to put two completely different forms of dance together, and I had to figure out what was going on, and nobody told me anything. And I had a lot of language interference. I was like, why am I doing this? I'm frustrated. And then suddenly I went like, oh, it's about the spine. And so three-dimensionality came in, and when three-dimensionality came into my life that way, my mind changed.
Okay.
It really, like, I was watching myself from the outside, which is a very strange thing. um but it was I suddenly had started having a real conversation with myself, which I probably not been aware of me doing it before.
It's actually not a strange thing because that's how you become conscious.
Yes.
To be the observer of oneself, to notice how
Yeah.
you're moving, to notice how you're singing, to notice how things function or how you're bringing things together. You have to observe. I wouldn't see it any other way. So no, I don't think it's that much of a strange concept. And then the fact that you realized
Hmm.
that you had to look and to
Hmm.
notice,
Hmm.
that's huge.
Yeah, it is
That's huge.
very huge, and it still stays in me. That was like more than 30 years ago now.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
still fresh like yesterday because it's really allowed me to see the world and people differently. I wouldn't say differently, but more holistically.
Okay.
And which has allowed me to sort of really listen to what people are trying to do and say, that then I can reflect on where I'm going.
Okay.
That's it really opened up that was a big key that opened up for me. And and the next big key was your Saturn year, as people say, 29, 30. And I was really wondering, who am I? The classic questions like, I don't know who I am. I'm performing all these dances, I'm loving it, but what is my story?
Right.
you know and so in that I went to London to do my master's in dance at the Laban Center. And I told my supervising professors that they asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I just want to swing the pendulum all the way and see what happens. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't know what would come out of it, but I just said, I've been doing all kinds of things and I don't know what I'm doing. And I just want to do it and see like where I land. And that's what I did. And that was the very seed that was birthed that now is my company Thresh.
So before you go there,
Yeah,
talk to us about where you landed for your master's because you had to have landed somewhere in order to graduate,
that's
and
right.
then and take us from the journey from London to discovery of how you landed in New York.
Oh yeah. Well, from Japan, I actually got married and I moved to the Midwest of America. I moved to Indianapolis, uh,
Okay,
which was a bigger culture shock than Japan, to be honest.
I bet you it was. How did you end up in Indianapolis?
Well, my husband then was working for General Motors. So,
Okay,
he was an
that-
engineer, they had the manufacturing systems of the office over there. And so as a dutiful Indian wife, I got married and I got my spouse visa and I moved there, moved there. So, and I got introduced to the Indian community there, and they were very lovely. The moment they knew my resume in dance, all of them wanted me to teach their kids, and so that they could grow up as proper uh American kids with Indian heritage, and not become
yeah,
westernized. And it was quite funny for me because India is very westernized, and I grew up in a westernized country. So they were looking at me as the cultural torchbearer of teaching them the rituals and the yoga and everything, and I came with none of that. I just came with art. So that was a big, big step for me to understand, what does migration mean? Like, what, as an immigrant, how do you define what you bring with you? And what is your
right.
responsibility with it? So when I saw these kids learning from me, some of them are like, we're forced to do this because our parents are telling us to do this, and the others are very eager. But for me, it was like, I was very particular about how they saw me, not as an auntie. They saw me as an artist, and for them to understand what does art mean? And
Right.
because that's how I grew up. I was given art. I wasn't told this is how you become Indian. That was never part of my journey. This is like, here's art, go journey with it.
Right.
And
Right.
even to this day, that's how I look at it because that is far more powerful, right? So for me, I told them, I said, I'm not a cultural torchbearer. I am not here to lecture your children on how to be Indian or what it is. I'm here to teach them art and the value of life through art. And to this day, some of them still are in touch with me there, and they're like mid-30s right now, you know.
Wow.
But they still remember their classes, and they say that those classes took them to places they would have never gone to because of the way it was opened up, right? So Indianapolis sort of opened me up to that way of like finding another door. Like, what do I do with it? Go to juvenile detention center, like run residency camps there or farm schools or things like that while touring. But I did feel quite isolated there because I'm a performer. And prior to going there, I was touring the world. So I was very, very conscious that I needed to get out and mingle with people, like-minded people in the world and do something together. So that frustration led me to want to go to maybe a university and find my people there. And then I did not find a place like that anywhere in America. um, there's like abundance of universities, wonderful universities here, but I wasn't looking to become an academic. I'm a practitioner. So whatever I bring to the table is because I've experienced it. I just wanted to go to like a laboratory, like an incubator,
Right.
that would allow me to explore, and be around people who are like master sculptors,
Hmm.
be with them. And so I found the Laban Center in London. It was theory and practice mixed. And Rudolf Laban, very famous in the Western world for his approaches and theories on movement, it's and harmony of man and nature. That was
Right.
the crux of his study. So it just sort of felt that's where I need to go. And I wanted to work and study under two very specific professors over there, and who said yes. They were completely different from each other, which was great. So I just felt like, I was broken with a sledgehammer and
Hmm.
I had to like refine myself. And that was my journey there, where I had to find a way to erase myself, which is not easy because I was already quite established in my classical dance world by then. People in that field and in the Indian community and who program that kind of dance already knew my name, but then I had to, on purpose, take myself out of it.
Okay.
Um, so that, it gave me the space to really reinvent myself and to find where I'm journeying instead of justifying everything I do. That's what London did for me when I was there and studying. I created my first contemporary dance pieces there. My first
Wow.
contemporary theater pieces were created there, but like in Japan, it gave me an opportunity to discover that spine, to discover what would happen if I didn't do my arm this way, but it went somewhere else from there, and then where would that lead me? But I used my first two pieces I created, I used very old Indian texts.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
I used a 17th century poem about a courtesan, and then I used a very ancient piece from the Rig Veda about a crazy gambler who cannot stop gambling. And that became my thesis piece. And they were two completely contemporary pieces. And it gave me a lot of freedom because I suddenly felt, I've been doing repertoires, but I haven't dived into the form. So this became all about understanding the form like mathematics.
Okay.
Suddenly I felt I was in the matrix and I was like, oh, well, this is what it's made of. And
Ah, okay.
I can pull this here and that there and boom, and this is going to happen. And suddenly I started seeing everything completely like being inside the matrix. And it was just completely exciting.
Wow. Wow. Is it possible to see those couple of pieces? Do you have links to them
I
somewhere, or
do. I do. And I'll
can
share
we
that with
put
you.
those links and share those with me? And to our audience, we'll put those down in the description box along with her bio, so that you have the opportunity to see these pieces that she's speaking about. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
you're
so
most welcome. It's like shocked everybody. And then the next thing I did was tour. So that brought me back to New York. You said, how did it bring you to New York? So I went back to Indianapolis and then I brought my husband there, from there to New York. We parted our ways in New York, but that brought me to New York, and immediately the Joyce Foundation gave me an opportunity. They used to have a series called Emerging Choreographer series, and
much.
saw my work, and it was just, I had just graduated with my master's. That was my master's thesis piece, and they immediately programmed it. So I got my big break in New York just performing that. And
Which
at
is
that,
huge, okay? Because I'm a native New Yorker
yeah,
and it is not easy in New York. You can't just come to New York and boom. And the fact that you did is phenomenal. It speaks volumes to what you bring to the table. Because being born and raised in New York and hanging around actresses, actors, dancers trying to make it in New York their
yeah,
whole lives, and people descending from everywhere in the world trying to make it in New York,
yeah.
it's not an easy place to be.
No, especially if you don't have, a mentor or somebody, promoting you, and
Right.
you're just like this, here I am sort of moment. It's like that funny dance in which movie was it? Was it On the Town, or which movie where Gene Kelly goes to every door to Broadway to show he can do something, and
Yes.
knocking on every door, and they're like, "This is great," but shuts the door.
Yes.
And to me, New York was like that. But to be given this opportunity, I would say Joyce was the place that really gave me the first foot into a huge arts capital like this. And so coming to New York actually was, if I lived in America, it was always New York that I wanted to live in. It's just the people. It was also very similar to India, the chaos and the
Oh yeah.
I grew up in the density of people. I cannot live without people.
Right. And it's like a harmonious chaos.
Yeah,
It may seem like chaos to those who aren't used to it, but it's just there's a rhythm to it and there's a harmony. It's like when theater district lets out, everybody's in the streets, but everybody knows what everybody else has been doing. And
yeah,
it's just a warmth and an understanding and a knowing, you
yeah.
know.
And it's a real human experience because
It is.
you see all walks of life. You see the huge economic disparity, but one cannot live without the other. And to me, that was very, I grew up with that. I grew up, because India, the rich and poor divide is so big, and yet everybody lives with everybody else. And you sort of
Right.
sort out the chaos, or you don't, or that's life, right? So there's a wonderful meditative slow dance, if I can put it that way, that I love being in highly chaotic cities because I don't see them as something negative. I just find there's a system to it.
Right.
There's a dance to it. And then if you're in the dance of it, it's just really amazingly powerful.
It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that part of it. So then bring us to, well, one other question before I get to the women's empowerment piece and the voices piece.
Yes.
How was it for you transitioning from the dancer to the choreographer? Because that is a huge transition.
Yeah.
And when you're used to being the piece and embodying the piece versus getting somebody to rise to the occasion of what you're looking for, those are two completely different pieces,
Yeah.
two different energies. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great moment when that happens. You either get very panicky and defensive because you've been a performer all your life, and the spotlight is always on you, and there is something about the need for the audience who give you the affirmation, and you live in that, right? And then when you're a choreographer, you're not there. Right?
Yeah,
You're physically not there, but there's a huge power, and I'm sure all choreographers will say this, but there's a huge power to it's like being the sculptor, right? And it's like being the potter. You're suddenly given clay, and you have to understand clay, and then to create and sculpt that clay, right? And there's like this magic that is given you're given that permission, and you are told to go create. And then there's to watch. When I learned how to be the choreographer, um more formally when I went to London. I had seeds of it when I was younger, like setting dances and dance pieces and ballets in my teachers' companies before. But it was always under the house of what the rules that worked here. Here in the contemporary dance world, it is like whatever, you know. And sometimes that's very scary because you want to hold on to some things. But
Right.
given like, here's a blank canvas, go create something, and you sit and stare at it for the longest time. And I think as a choreographer, for me, I really had to listen, watch, and see how I would awaken all my senses to be
Okay.
very present in the moment. And the person who actually taught me about choreography without her knowledge was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother.
Wow. Okay.
Before I went to Japan, I didn't know what kind of food I would get there, and I didn't know anything about cooking. So my grandmother said, just come to me for 10 days, I'll teach you all the basics of cooking. Now, she's a speed cook. Like, if you turn your head, you missed it, right?
Okay.
But she could also make like 4 or 5 dishes at the same time, right? So I had questions for her saying, so how much did you put? She says, watch. What is the color? Smell. Like taste it. Oh, look at the color. Look at the temp. Feel the temperature. And how much salt? A teaspoon. What teaspoon here? This is how much you put. And this is how much it goes. And so she awakened all my senses, and I was very present. So even now for me, cooking is I try to follow a recipe sometimes. I just can't. you know but I think she was my first guru of choreography. Then fast forward years later, when I went to the Laban Center, to a more formalized institution of choreographing, figuring out how to do this, I think that came in. So as a choreographer, I think you have to understand how to uh, create the dialogue between the body, space, and time.
Okay.
There is no solo work as far as I'm concerned. When they see it's a solo piece, I'm like, I said it's always a trio. You begin as a trio. That's this body, space, and time are partners. And then you can keep adding on to it. Because if you don't have those three working together, the three dimensionality is lost and the energy is lost. And you can't hold space, you can't work with time, and then your body does not know where it belongs.
Mm,
There's a big power in that because suddenly you're starting to see a space very differently from being a performer. A performer is executing something that's been given to her or him, and then they take it to the next dimension because
right.
they're flowing in it. There's a flow, right? What we call the flow, and dance is the biggest of the flows. It just aligns the body completely, mind and body completely, and then you're in that flow, and everything is just you're just swimming with ease. And I think as a choreographer, I found that to make the flow happen is so much powerful.
Wow. Wow. It's really, really beautiful in the respect that I can actually envision you working with somebody, and what a concept, because body, space, and time, and to tell them that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And it makes them automatically stop looking at it in that singularity and
Mhm.
bring it in parallel to all of the pieces in terms of the space that they're using. That's amazing. So I never heard of that concept before. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing what you bring to the table, and really what you did is make it a leap of octave higher. It's not your standard dance. I can do any step, just show me the steps. So that must have been interesting picking dancers for the
Yeah.
works that you do, because I'll tell you what, New York City breeds some of the best dancers in the world. But you're not looking for the best dancer in the world who could just pick up any step inside of show it to me once and I can do it. What you're really looking at is the space and time, and the body movements. How are they moving through space and time? How are they moving through the space? Are they flowing, or are they just doing the steps? Wow, that brings. I'm sitting here. I'm talking to you about it. Oh wow, okay, I get it. I get it.
It's really wonderful working with many of the dancers here. I normally look for dancers in the contemporary field
Okay.
Even some of the ballet dancers who've had contemporary dance experience, because they're like plastic, they are cross-trained. They have every kind of movement and theater, and they throw themselves in all kinds of spaces that classical dancers normally don't, and yeah, and for me, that's the clay I'm talking about. As a creator of something, you just want it to do what your mind and body wants it to do, right? But if you're limited by that, then the choreographer's vision is also limited. So I've been very fortunate so far to work with some amazing dancers who I look in particular who have an inner narrative, and that inner narrative is very important, because then they're able to hold the space and time. They're able to understand where breathing comes from. They understand ultimately the intention of the movement.
Okay.
And I think the intention of the movement is what creates the environment for the audience, right? So it's like if you are suddenly held by the dancer, it's because they can hold time and space, right? And it doesn't matter what form of dance it is, right? I mean, you see
Right.
Buto, or you see, flamenco, or whatever you see. It's like that dancer or that moment that's been created, the fact that they understood how to hold space and time means there's the artist. They cease to be the dancer, that's the artist, you know.
Wow.
And for
Yeah.
me, it's like, as I'm seeking that in me, that's what I want to bring out in the people I work with, and then it's just like, it's sheer happiness when you sit back and you watch that piece unfold, because at that point it's theirs. It's nothing to do with us
Yeah.
at that point, it's yours, and
First.
there's a great beauty and joy in that sort of passing on. Like I said earlier, you're part of your little fish that's swimming here, and you're passing on that little seed to the next fish, and I think that's what it is. You pass on that baton in the relay of life, and you're telling them that to be human is to be 3D, is to have your inner narrative going on. And dance is your body is your first tool.
But what you're really doing, Priti, is you're giving them the keys to transcendence. You're giving them the foundation and the steps and the ingredients, the secret spices of how much of this, and this of space, time, and movement that you need to have in
Yeah.
order to reach that moment,
Yeah.
that leap of octave to the next level. And I love it. I
Yeah,
absolutely love
it's really yeah. I'm very blessed to be given this, and I just want to keep going on.
it. So then let's go to the other leg of what you do, which is you have your project of the voices being amplified. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my company that I started, Thresh, it's short for a threshold. So,
Mhm.
again, it's like what you bring from your past and where you go in the future. So it's all about the now. It's like the liminal space. It's like it's really about like inverting and subverting all that's happening. It's like the shaman's way of taking, the young men out of the village into the forest, and they return as men. They go as boys,
Yeah.
they return as men, and that's the liminal space. And my background academically is psychology and then to anthropology, so I really got into a lot of this idea of the liminal space, um, and reading a lot about it. And so Thresh came out of that. So Thresh came out of that to form a platform about the contemporary narratives of our people today. It's like, who are we? What is my story? And so all the works we've done, we're entering our 20th year now. So all the works we've done so far have been about in and about that questioning, whether it's one dancer piece, or it's like multiple performers piece, and at this point in my life, I have started questioning my own journey as a woman. And for me, I have a daughter who's a teenager, and I've been observing her all these years, and tried to, I'm trying to find where I am in that journey, and she's in her journey, but as I'm going, I'm trying to locate myself and go like, to what is my story now? And that sort of kickstarted. a solo work of mine in called Stories by Hand, and I'll send you that link. And it is autobiographical, with my collaborating partner Paul Kaiser, who was like my literary dramaturg. We basically, brought it to life around my coffee table, making him a lot of Indian tea. Where he
I
just
love
wanted me to talk about my life and memories and start using my hands, which I naturally do. And then he'd stop me and said, "What was that gesture you just did? And why did you do that? And how do you show it?" And so it became a lot about like memory pods. And then it became a huge page about all these memories of mine about relationships. And then they started mapping each other out until we form memory clusters. And so
Okay.
Stories by Hand is autobiographical. It's all memory clusters of the journey of a woman in the 21st century, coming all the way from India and landing in America. And what has my journey been so far? And through the lens of these relationships. Um, and it took me all the way back to the rudimentary foundations of my classical dance, but making it very accessible to the audience through my stories. Uh,
Wow.
and so that really opened up a way of people engaging, feeling they were given permission to talk about very taboo topics, very hidden spaces, that blocked spaces that caused anxiety and stress in them. Because my topics went from very funny to deeply dark spaces. The fact that I did it in public, people stayed back to talk about it. And I didn't realize it then, but that became the starter for what I want to embark on now, which is now hearing other women's stories. So we are for our as our 20th anniversary sort of project, we are starting on a project called Voices of Women. And these are the unheard, untold stories of women in America and how interconnected they are, and how big or small, in whatever manner, they're all change makers. And that it touches very lighthearted topics to very taboo topics to, you know, I'm seeing that as we film them and then get the younger generation to sort of get creative and created dances based on them, which to me is like, again, passing on that baton, right? But I feel it's a time when women's journeys are sort of in very siloed spaces. And I think it just needs to come out into the open and being discussed, not necessarily as activism or rebellion, but just as is.
Yes.
Because the best stories are the stories that just are.
They just are. They're unfiltered, and they are. And that's where you and I like definitely meet, in the respect that, as you know, wombology, and I'm so excited to have you as one of our podcasters on wombology, being able to start in a month or so. And we are amplifying women's voices. We are amplifying women's stories, women's interests. And does this exclude men? No, it does not. But what it does is it gives you the perspective of how we as women view things, how we process things, how we lead with the questions that are of interest to us. And so then you can understand a woman's perspective. And I think that that's important. And that is not at the exclusion of men. We are supported by men in every way. And actually, in our platform, we have wonderful men supporting us in music and in conversations, both. But it allows us to take the lead by which we have not for so many years,
Yeah.
in terms of just our stories, our thoughts, our expressions, our ability to navigate, our ability to gestate, our ability to birth things that are new for us
Yeah.
as we see them, and
Yeah.
not how others see us seeing them.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think it's a space also for women to have the opportunity to have self-reflection and think about who they really are, and go into sort of like a laboratory space where they can try things out to figure things out, because there's been so much patterning, there's been so much societal patterning and thumbprinting that we don't even know if we do something different whether that's accepted or right, or feel awkward about, or feel sort of as if we are great rebels. I just think that there's a huge power because in an evolutionary way, we're given the power of giving birth, as you said. To be given that power of giving birth is just fundamentally means that the level of power we have inside ourselves is just that much higher in
Yeah.
not in hierarchy with the men, but in what we think of as ourselves.
Yes.
So, and
Yeah.
I think to understand what does the feminine mean, what does it mean to be a woman, and place that completely out there without any definitions or justifications, I think it's it's much needed just so that we can redefine and give the opportunity for the next generation to sort of take that and then play with that. You know,
Exactly, exactly. And what does it mean to be a woman through our own eyes? Because
absolutely.
when I look at cultures, and I'm sitting here in Africa, and there are many men who will define what a woman should be and should be doing, et cetera, et cetera. So as we say this, it is really the discovery of what a woman should be for self
Yes.
and what they truly want to amplify and what they want to bring forward, embody, emanate,
Yes.
create,
Yes.
etc.
And
So
what are we normalizing? That's the question for me. But I think because it's so personal for me with my daughter, it's like, what am I normalizing? What am I forcing myself into, or when should I step back and observe and then understand where that dynamic flow is and how does that naturally come from me instead of fighting myself even before she enters my picture?
exactly.
And I
Exactly.
and I think that definitely comes with, because I'm in the field of dance, that is where my go-to place is, where I can refine that conversation that's going on inside me, that transcendence that you're talking about, that sometimes just moves away because of daily life and needs of the daily life. It's to refine that and to keep that active at all times, and that space for oneself, I think, is so important if we're going to actually pass on something of value to the next generation.
Yeah. And oh my God, I don't even want to end this conversation, but we're like almost an hour now.
Wow.
And what I would love for you to share is that what is it that you want to share to the masses, given this opportunity of sharing a message to leave them with?
Wow, that's a big responsibility.
But we all do it in our
I
own way,
know.
our own legacy.
I think one thing I would say is that honesty.
Mm,
I think it's a very big thing, and not to be scared of it. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be very freeing. And by that, I don't mean just blurt out whatever you think, right? But to really sort of reflect on really where you're journeying and really where you're holding yourself and what is that inner battle and then how can you let go? And I think that's the honesty, like being honest with yourself, and that is your journey. No matter what field you're in, it doesn't matter because that is going to channel you towards the right purpose, right? And that's going to create that kind of curiosity and then start building that road towards whatever you end up making or journeying, because that's going to be based on truth. And you can go through long periods of time not even knowing what it is and getting frustrated and giving up. But I would just say stick to. There's one thing that I would tell or pass on would be like it's just finding that honesty, and it's different for different people. And I just think yours is your honesty, but as long as you know that, then I would just say then you can trust your story. It's one of the, out of my stories by hand piece, I've created a teaching course, like a workshop series called Trusting Your Story. And it's about taking different elements of dance and theater and and different cultural ways of expressing through the body, is to find your own sort of inner leader. And so I would always say, like, in order to find that, you have to search for your own story and then trust it. And then when you give that out to the public, that's when that permission door opens. And that happened to me without without me thinking about it with my piece. And then when I saw the way audiences responded, I realized that, but this is community. This is what we're building.
Right.
So I would come down to that honesty as the foundational factor to trust your own story.
So thank you. Thank you so, so much. And if people wanted to reach out to you and speak with you further and learn more about Thresh, can you share your information?
Totally, totally. I'll be so happy to do that.
Thank you. Then we'll have that posted down in the description below. Priti, thank you so much for this opportunity, for the conversation, for your contribution, for your works, everything that you bring, for your amplification of your voice. We thank you for coming, and wow.
Thank you so much, Enolia. This has been so wonderful just to give me this platform to just share my journey, which, you have such wonderful speakers too, and their journeys are so fascinating themselves. It's wonderful to be part of that collection of storytellers.
Well, thank you. And we look forward to hearing more from you on Wombology. So you're going to tune in and look for Priti on Wombology. And that's on Fave Unite Radio, and that'll be on the description box too. So I want to thank the audience for being here. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe. Please share this episode. Share, 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 because you will be helping somebody who's an artist, who's a dancer, who wants to learn more. And so, with that, we're going to say goodbye and thank you again, Priti. And this has been another episode of The Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. Take care for now and see you next time. Bye bye.